Hi everyone! I have some really exciting news. I have become a member of the Rubber Dance design team. And today you can see the first project that I have made inspired by the beautiful stamps from their collection. The inspiration for this project came from this stamp set. It is called Sketchy Birds, and I will be stamping these birds using VersaFine ink in Onyx black color on Canson mixed media paper. Now once the birds are stamped, I will start coloring them, and for that I will use my watercolors. For the birds I will be using mostly orange, yellow and blue color. Of course, varying a bit between different shades, because that always helps make your images look more dimensional. Anyway, about my coloring style, there is really not much to say. I didn't do any fancy techniques, just applying color loosely. But don't worry, later I will be adding some small details using another medium, but soon you'll see what I mean. Now, while I am coloring these images, I would like to use this opportunity to remind you that you can always check Rubber Dance blog, because there you can find many other fabulous inspirational projects using this, but also many other stamps from the Rubber Dance collection. Their blog is really amazing source of inspiration for those days when you feel like your creative mojo is running low. Oh, and I will leave the link for their blog in the description box down below. Now one bird is colored. Now I will repeat the same process for the other two birds. Of course, this is serving just as inspiration. If you don't feel comfortable with watercolors, you can use any other mediums that you prefer. But when I want to achieve more or less this kind of loose style, I do tend to reach for my watercolors. As you can see, the process is repeating, so I won't bore you with this anymore. Instead, I will move on to the next step, which is adding details using colored pencils. The color pencils that I tend to use are Prismacolors, but of course there are many other on the market which can offer really amazing results as well. And first, let me tell you, this is again really an optional step. I just do this because I don't feel myself so skillful with watercolors, and I find adding details is much easier for me when I use colored pencils. First, I have reached for the darkest shade, in this case darkest shade of blue, to add some shadows, mostly trying to emphasize some underlevels of feathers, going around the beak, framing the eye a bit, add the tail, and then I will move on to the slightly brighter shade. Here you can go crazy and add as much as shades as you want. You can add just one shade, or you can go adding 5, 6, as much as your heart's desire. But I will go by adding 3 shades, though I will very soon give up on my third one, as you will see very soon. Now, one thing which is really important to make your images look less flat is adding highlights. And that is what I am doing with my white colored pencil. Also, it helps blend out the marks of the blue colored pencils. But it all depends on the look that you are going for, because sometimes even I like those pencil marks. Now, here I just want to apologize. From the whole screen area that I had available, I am coloring right there on the edge of visibility. Sometimes when I get into the creative zone, I tend to forget that I am filming and just concentrate on the work that I am doing. Very often I even cover the filming area with my head as I lean above my project, but I do my best to edit those silly parts for you. Anyway, I hope here you can see the effect of the color pencils. I think it was just the touch that I felt like missing. In most of the occasions, I tend to edit out the coloring process or just not record it at all, because for me, I like those tiny details and it tends to last quite a lot. But still, from time to time, I just leave it for those of you who might be interested. And in case you are not interested in the coloring process, just skip next 2 minutes of this video. But for those of you who like watching coloring process and find it relaxing as I do, enjoy next 2 minutes and I will try to pick out some nice music for you. Now, as you can see, the birds are colored. Now I just need to fussy cut them. And as usual, after fussy cutting, I tend to cover those white cut areas. And for that, I usually use a brush pen in black color, but this time I wanted to add just a pinch of vintage vibe to my project. So I'm covering those white edges using Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink. Now, here is my journal. It is actually a Dina weekly journal, but since it was so full of projects, the book started to fall apart, so I rebinded it. So that's why it looks this way. But now let's create that background. The colors that I chose are from PaperArtsy collection, and they are called Autumn Fire, Tango, Sunshine, and Buff. Here I will mention that I didn't use gesso and I'm applying the paint directly on my paper, but if you prefer you can of course use a primer. Now here at start I am applying first the darkest shades, which is the Autumn Fire, and the plan was to, as I go toward the middle of my paper, to go towards brighter shades. Oh, and as you saw, I did apply some water to make my paints blend easier. Here I'm going Sunshine towards middle, and then again on the other side Autumn Fire, followed by Tango, Sunshine, and just a touch of Buff. The paint I was first applying with Art by Marlene. acrylic paint brushes, but very soon I will move on to using artist blending sponges. But if you don't have those, you can always use makeup sponges or even your fingers if you don't mind getting messy a bit. Here I did mess up a bit because I was distracted by my kids, and I did mess up a bit. You will see very soon that I will accidentally put a buff on my darkest area. Here it is. But that's actually one thing which I really love about acrylic paints. They layer beautifully on each other and you can really easily fix your mistakes. The placement of the brighter colors was in this case really important to me because of the next step, where I will try to add some contrast with those brighter shades and a stencil. The stencil which I chose to work with is from Rubber Dance and it is called Organic Number 1. Really beautiful design, and it will make some really interesting background texture, as you will see really soon. Here you will notice the transition of the colors from sunshine to buff, going brighter towards the middle. And the background darker color really provides nice contrast. Now of course I repeated the same process on the other side, and I didn't resist adding some splatters since I had all those remaining paints on my craft mat. Now once again I will dry my background before moving on to the next step. In this little spray bottle, it's the infusion called Just Walnut from PaperArtsy diluted with simple clean water. And that way I actually made a spray which gives such a nice and subtle vintage effect. And how subtle, or actually not subtle, you want it depends only on the proportion of the infusion and the water which you choose to mix. In my spray bottle I put a very small amount of the infusion crystals because I feel that way I can better control the effect. But I do think I will still make one bottle with a stronger concentration just for fun. And again drying my layer before I move on to the next step, stamping. This stamp set is again from Rubber Dance and it is called Mixed Media Marks number 1. Now I will do a lot of stamping, but first I will do some heat embossing. I will use these stitched patterns as something on what my birds will stand on. That's why I wanted it a little bit more dimensional compared to the other stamping that I will do. And for heat embossing I will use VersaFine ink in Onyx black color and clear embossing powder. Here I already heat embossed those two designs. Now I will emboss this line. Most of you anyway know how this process goes. Now, as my project already had some of those brownish tints, I will use ground Espresso Distress Oxide ink to add some more background interest using the exactly same stamp set that I use for heat embossing. This Rubber Dance stamp set called Mixed Media Marks is actually really useful for any one of you who likes making these background interest, who like mixed media, who just likes and enjoys stamping. Perhaps you also noticed that I'm using a first, second and even third generation of stamping, because this was supposed to be more in the background and I didn't want the effect of these stamps to be too strong or to give too busy effect to my background. And you can also notice I'm choosing a couple of different designs, some words as well. And I'm using, as you see, my finger for stamping instead of using acrylic block, because I felt like that way I can control better what area of my stamps I want to be transferred, as I didn't want the full image. Now time for some more splatters, once again. And this time I'm using Winsor & Newton Black India ink, as I find it to be very vibrant. But of course you can use black gesso, black acrylic paint, black watercolor, whatever you have at hand. And the white Winsor & Newton writing ink. Now, as you noticed, while fussy cutting, I kinda cut off the legs of my poor birds, because that's really tedious to fussy cut. And now what you can do, you can either draw your legs or stamp them, as I will do here. I am placing the ink only on the legs, because that's the only detail from the bird that I am missing. And I think this actually saves a lot of nerves from some messy fussy cutting session. After this, of course, I have to adhere my birds. And since I didn't want too much dimension on my project, I will use liquid glue. And now for the last step, the sentiment. For that I will be using Mix Sentiment 2023 stamp set. I already previously stamped and heat embossed these words on a black and white cardstock, as you can see here. And I have already fussy cut 3 words that I wanted to form my sentiment. And the words that I have picked are "we belong together." Of course, I will adhere my sentiment, and that's it for this project. I hope you have enjoyed my crafting session and that you like the result. Don't forget to check the Rubber Dance blog. And thank you so much for being with me today, and see you soon again. Bye!